Every so often, people come to me for advice and sometimes gear repair. This time around, I received something from Outfitter online, and as you know, I hardly ever endorse anyone and I'm not sponsored by anybody. But it just so happened that I've been dealing with Outfitter for quite a while. Sir Mike has been really professional to deal with. The particular problem on this Kershaw is the assisted opening. Now, personally, Kershaw knives have not appealed much to me simply because I haven't found any Kershaw knives that were designed just right. They're often too big, and the lines, the design elements on the knives themselves hardly ever appeal to me. But this time around, this Kershaw Korra 1409 is a very sleek, it's very slim. The blade profile is somewhat of a spear point. It's a flipper, as many Kershaw knives are. The last Kershaw knife I ever owned was the Cryo, which I eventually gave up specifically because of the assisted opening. That spring was just too stiff, and I cut myself with it at least twice. Now, the simple fix for this Kershaw Cora is take out the spring that assists the blade in opening. And while the principle is simple, just open up the knife, take out the spring, and you revert to manual opening of the blade. It's simple, but it's not that easy to do because of the construction of the knife itself. You have to take out at least four screws on the frame and one in the pivot. The pivot isn't a problem. It's the screws that hold the standoffs, the spacers, that are a particular problem, since I don't know what Kershaw did, but there seems to be some really strong thread lock applied on the screws, which is why you'll need a pair of torque screws to disassemble this particular knife. Overall construction, there's reasonable jimping at the back of the blade and on the flipper tab, which also doubles as a guard when holding it. Blade centering is fairly decent. The liner lock engages almost 100%. The clip is designed to be deep carry and it almost disappears in the pocket. Here it is compared to my favorite EDC blade, the Spyderco Native 5 Lightweight. Overall, the build quality of the knife is fairly decent considering this is one of the Kershaws that are made in China. There is no blade play, although I've already tweaked the pivot so that the blade is perfectly centered. It carries well, it's lightweight, and I consider this thing to be sort of a gentleman's knife. The blade steel is 5CR15 MOV, which is basically a kitchen knife blade steel, so it should be slicey enough for food prep. It's not a particularly hard to use knife, but for EDC I find the size and the design of this knife to be perfect for EDC. Now let's see some size comparisons of the Korra compared with an 84mm Victorinox waiter. Here's the Korra side by side with the Spyderco Native 5 Lightweight and the Cold Steel Pro Light Sport. I would personally carry. I like the size, I like the sleek design, and now that I've de-assisted the knife, one advantage is that I can open it two-handed very quietly, very discreetly. The lockup is still the same, it's just that the blade doesn't fire off of the handle like when it was assisted. I can still flick the blade, but then again it requires some wrist action. And now that the blade is de-assisted, you can actually open the blade just by the force of gravity. So at first it feels rather loose, but the blade is quite secure once it's in the pocket. Although if you accidentally drop this in the closed position, it would certainly open. Now, one other thing to remember when you de-assist the blade is that there's very little strain on the stop bar. Eventually, the spring that assists the blade opening is going to wear out or break, and I've seen that happen. So, without it, with the assisted blade, you can open it quietly and close it just as easily with one hand. Not like when it was assisted. So, yeah, would I carry something like this? I probably would. And I'd like to thank again Sir Mike of Outfitter Online for giving me a chance to experience this Kershaw Korra 1409. And as always, thank you guys for watching. This adds to the really short list of videos that I've seen online about the Kershaw Korra. And I hope this helps. Thank you for the likes and subscriptions. And as always, make your lives emergency proof.